The Nene Washes near Peterborough in the Fens is a 3,500 acre nature reserve that supports one of the highest densities of birds in southern England. It's home to some of Britain's most threatened species: black-tailed godwits, lapwings and redshanks. However, the warden on the washes, Charlie Kitchen, explains that despite the abundant wildlife, this low-lying grassland landscape is missing something: the corncrake.
For hundreds, even thousands of years, the corncrakes would have turned up every summer to nest in wet grassland sites like this. It's been with us for literally thousands of years, probably ever since we first started farming and clearing the forests of northern Europe. And now, in the last 50, 60 years, they've become extinct in southern England.
The corncrake still survives in Scotland, the Hebridean Islands and in other parts of Europe. It's a small, secretive bird with a peculiar and relentless song, a once familiar sound of spring. But here in southern Britain, the corncrake has become a distant memory, a lost call of our countryside. In 1864, in his History of British Birds, the Reverend Morris wrote of the landrail, or corncrake:
"Everyone must recall with pleasure when first he heard the curious cry of the corncrake. The male it is that gives utterance to this dissonant cry. It is not infrequently continued throughout the calm of the night until morning comes again."
100 years ago, there were corncrakes in virtually every county of England, Wales and Scotland. People in England who are interested in nature conservation would like the fauna of England restored, and this is a bit of the fauna of England that we lost during the 20th century, and we'd like it back.
In the year 2000, the RSPB joined with English Nature, now Natural England, and ZSL Whipsnade Zoo in an ambitious project for the new millennium: to bring back the corncrake to the wild landscape of East Anglia. The stakes were high, as nothing like this has ever been attempted before.
It's going to be difficult and it's going to take quite a number of years. Corncrakes are very short-lived, for one thing, and they fly to southern Africa to winter, and very few of them survive to get back the next year. We have to release an enormous number of birds to get back the number of survivors that we need to breed successfully in the wild. So that means that we have to set up a breeding project and actually get the numbers breeding in captivity, and that's something that is quite new for us in this country.
The corncrake reintroduction project began at ZSL Whipsnade Zoo in Bedfordshire. Birdkeeper Andy Reeves specialises in the breeding of birds.
These pens, which have been built here over the last couple of weeks, are for the corncrake project. To breed birds here for release in the future.
Andy is very good at looking after birds, and I think if anyone will breed them, he will.
It's a bit unreal at the minute. You can't believe it's going to happen until the birds arrive and we see them in here settled, and then I'll be a much happier man, I think, when I see them out here.
In 2001, 15 corncrakes from Germany were brought to Whipsnade from Chester Zoo, where they'd been quarantined.
Excellent. The first corncrake you've ever seen, wasn't it?
These corncrakes were the pioneers of a captive breeding stock. Their offspring would be handed over for release at the RSPB's Nene Washes Nature Reserve, and offspring of these released birds would re-establish a homegrown breeding population in the Fens. At least that was the plan.
Right, well, all the birds have successfully arrived, and the next job to do will be to identify which sexes are which.
This is really special for us. It's going to be the first time I'll ever touch the corncrake. I'm looking forward to it. Okay. I'll wait first.
We'll just get the ring number, yeah.
Okay, I was just listening for the heart and lungs, for good regularity of the beat.
What colour ring we're giving it?
This is a nice royal blue one. Very obvious.
Okay, thank you. Lovely. I can go number 2. The whole project's been developing over a number of weeks. It's just nice to see the final bit. So we've got lots of help, which is really good. It means we can get the birds into their aviaries quickly. Everyone here is involved with birds either directly or indirectly, and these corncrakes are an extremely exciting project for everyone involved.
Like some of my other colleagues, it's too good an opportunity to miss, to see them. They're such pretty little birds and such a rarity in this country.
You know, fingers crossed, maybe have some breeding this season.
But it wasn't to be. The new arrivals spent the rest of the summer of 2001 settling into their new surroundings. The following spring, Andy finally got the chance to really test his skills.
First time I've actually heard a corncrake call was a few days ago, and since that time all three males are calling very, very loudly.
To minimise disturbance, only Andy was allowed near the breeding pens. The cages were designed to make conditions for the birds as natural as possible.
So to hear that first bird calling the other day was just... nearly made my heart stop, to be honest. It was just fantastic. Each individual bird's got a different voice, so I can identify which male's calling. Oh. And that's our most dominant male calling there. He seems to fire off this second one. I'm hoping that the loudest male, he'll be the one that we have fertile eggs from first. A couple of days ago we noticed that a small nest has been made by the male in Aviary 12. For me this is just sort of incredible news, because what we're going to have is the first breeding in East Anglia for many, many years, although in captivity, and it's the start of this fantastic release project.
During that spring of 2002, it rained really hard.
The weather has been horrendous for the first lot of chicks to hatch, and it's one thing that frightens me a great deal is if it rains. It rained the same night that these babies hatched, and I found the following morning I found three of them motionless on the floor, and of course I was sort of like, oh my god, we've lost babies already. So I put them in my hand and breathed on the three babies, and there's a very, very slight movement from their legs. So I stuck them in an incubator, and they all came round, which was really, really good. We could have designed enclosures completely covered and perhaps had a higher success rate with rearing chicks, but we want really good parent-reared, strong chicks released, which have got the best chance of success and survival. Little baby.
Meanwhile, up at Nene Washes, Charlie Kitchen was looking forward to getting his hands on the first delivery of healthy chicks from Whipsnade. But first, he had to make sure the conditions for the corncrakes would be just right.
Corncrakes like to skulk in the taller vegetation, and we've got to make sure that there's areas of taller vegetation at all times of year for them, from the moment they turn up at the end of April to the moment they leave at the end of September, early October time. That on the right hand side is a hayfield. We've moved our haying dates gradually from the 1st of July to this year, 1st of August. This is to protect the corncrakes, to allow them to have their second brood successfully and escape the hay cutters. This 1st of August date for hay cutting, it's very, very late in the season. The crop isn't going to be that valuable to the farmers. So I've lowered the price, and they're going to have to cut it in a certain way from the inside of the field out, rather than sort of what they do at the moment is cut from the outside to the inside of the field and then finally chop up all the corncrakes or this is what's happened in the past, of course. Their animals have died as they've done the last cut in the middle of the field.
Back at Whipsnade, things were not going Andy's way.
We've had a bit of a nightmare, really. As you can see, we've got a couple of dead female corncrakes here, and these two both had youngsters. These have been killed by a weasel. Now the aviaries were designed to sort of be completely vermin proof. A mole has probably gone under, and this little chappie here has gone through the mole hole and got into the aviaries. This is what happens. It's a natural predation thing to occur.
So these were both females with chicks, yeah?
Yeah.
And the chicks were taken by the weasel?
Yeah, the weasel had eaten the chicks. In fact, we was trapped with a little corncrake in its mouth.
So what's next then?
Make some numbers up, I think that's important.
Yeah.
Obviously try and find out where this little chap got in.
Thanks to adverse weather and weasels, In 2002, only 6 corncrakes were reared.
Lovely, watch the toes on the line. Right, these are the youngsters to go to the washes. Ready for the release pens. They've already had a health check already by the vet. So it's exciting though, to know they're going to be released, but also at the same time it's it's a bit upsetting seeing them go, isn't it? Here we go.
This is your temporary home for the next couple of weeks.
These young corncrakes were kept in pens on the edge of the Nene washes for up to 3 weeks to ensure that this place, rather than Whipsnade, would be the home they remembered and would return to after their long migration to Africa.
We're supplementing the diet of the corncrake chicks. And this is the sort of food that the birds have got to learn to eat themselves and fend for themselves. Well, we've just been through the nettle patch, and the nettles are really rich in snails. There's a lot of snails, many of them pretty small things like this. All ideal corncrake food, nice rich calcium source. Caterpillars, nice juicy caterpillars, nice sort of food item for a corncrake.
To gather information about where the young corncrakes would be feeding, they were fitted with radio tags before being released into the wild.
So here's the radio tag. It's got this small sort of halo of gauze stuck onto it, and that's there to give us more surface area for attaching the tag to the bird's back. So this one is 285, so we've dialed up its frequency on there and it's cheeping away. Happy?
Yeah, bird not.
Hang on. Probably a month or so, I would suspect that tag would stay on, perhaps as little as 2 weeks. Okay. Fixed on.
We're going to pop them straight away into a suitable field. These birds have got to make a living out here on the washes, and then in the late summer, autumn, they'll migrate all the way to Africa, which is a long way, Mediterranean and Sahara. And lots of bird catching and predators on the route. And then they've got to winter in Africa, where there's even more ground predators than we've got here. And then they've got to come all the way back in the spring. That's the sound of a very anxious corncrake, keen to get out. Can we go?
All right.
Okay.
Here it goes. Look at it. Wow, look, that's amazing. That's what it's playing.
Fabulous.
How far have they gone?
That is
One jar. Incredible, isn't it?
wow.
Fantastic.
Excellent.
That's amazing, isn't it? Because they always look like feeble flyers, but
So we walk out hundreds of yards to this spot in this field thinking this just looks just perfect for corncrakes.
oh, there he goes. Again, a strong, look at that, strong flyer. Yeah. Incredible. That is just amazing, isn't it?
So much for thinking that they're going to come out of the boxes and scuffle straight into the grasses and sedges. Not.
They've got radio tags on them, so that we'll be following them every day, firstly to make sure they're still alive and coping with their environment. And also we want to see what sort of habitat the corncrakes will use and make sure that there's plenty of that habitat for them when we produce large numbers of them.
After several weeks of monitoring the 6 radio tag corncrakes, it was clear that by September 2002, the last bird had left on its epic migration to Africa. But would any of these birds return? Winter is a busy time at the Nene washes. Thousands of hooper swans and Buick swans arrive from northern Europe and Russia, joined by countless ducks and waders like widgeons, pochards and lapwings. The 6 corncrakes released the previous summer were by now perhaps basking under African skies. By springtime 2003, Charlie Kitchen was becoming anxious.
If corncrakes were going to turn up, they would have turned up by now. It doesn't look like any of the 6 birds that were released last year are going to come back. It's exactly as we'd expected, to be honest. It would just be fantastic to have had a bird.
Despite the disappointment, valuable lessons had been learned. Back at Whipsnade, Andy was optimistic about prospects for the coming year.
All right, well today I'm hoping to find some eggs in the nest. We know there's a nest here. So let's have a look. So I'm really hoping that we should have an egg today. Door shut. Oh, fantastic. Look at that, 2 beautiful eggs there. And they've been laid in the last 24 hours. No eggs yesterday. And we've got 2 smashing corncrake eggs. Oh, fantastic, look at this. It's just amazing seeing the variation in colour you get with corncrake eggs, but it weighs about between 10 and 12 grams. Right, what we've got here is a second set of breeding aviaries, and the reason these are a little bit closer to our mess room is so I can observe the adult birds and get more valuable information for breeding.
With only modest success the previous year, Andy was under pressure to produce many more chicks during 2003.
So these ones, what we'll do is we'll pop them in here. Quite big eggs, these ones. Now, because these eggs haven't pipped yet, that's the first stage of hatching. You get a little fracture on the side of the egg. What I'll do is I'll just pop them into this incubator over here. So this is all set up for the correct temperature for corncrake eggs. And as soon as they're pipped, they'll be moved into the hatching incubator. Right, here we are. This is the hatching module, which is high humidity to help assist the chicks to hatch. We've got 8 corncrake eggs here, and they've all pipped now. And they'll go through a process which is called breaking up, and they'll break up a little air hole where the pip is, and they'll probably be hatched today, because it's 17 days today, so fingers crossed we'll have another 7 babies this afternoon.
With numbers growing fast, it became clear that a full-time foster mother was needed for the corncrake chicks.
They come into these wooden brooders where the temperature is being dropped down every day, so that by day 14 they are ready to go to the release site. I've always worked with birds. It's all I've ever wanted to do. I'm definitely a bird person.
It's been a really productive year compared to last year. I mean, last year was sort of a learning curve, and we had a few problems with weasels, etc. This year we're producing a nice number of chicks, and I'm really looking forward to next season, calling males at the Nene washes, I hope.
One lesson learned from 2002 was that it would be better to release the chicks gently into food-rich undergrowth, so they'd be less likely to fly off.
So this is a good sign. The fact that the water mint's got holes in its leaves means there's some insects. Probably, I suspect, leaf beetle larvae, but they've been chewing holes in those water mint leaves. And the thing that did that is the kind of thing that a corncrake would like to eat. I'm going to put the bag down and undo the neck, and then I'm going to leave it open and walk off for a few metres and just wait for a few minutes. If all goes well, the bird will scuttle off into the vegetation and it won't fly, and we probably won't be able to see it at all. I feel it's the beginning of what I hope is going to be a long-term process of getting this bird back into breeding in England. I don't have any illusions that these particular birds are necessarily going to come back and found the breeding population, but we're learning.
Perfecting the release technique meant it was now time to call in the press to let everyone know how the project was going.
Okay, you ready?
Yep.
Okay, so I think this looks a good place.
Yes, definitely a good spot.
So let's get the bird out. So I think we're ready to let this one go. See all the insects around it, even there.
It's pretty weird.
2003 had been a promising year for the project team. Hopes were high that the following spring would see the first birds make it back to the Nene washes. But for now, they could only pray that some corncrakes had survived the migration to Africa. By May 2004, the weather was matching Charlie's mood, though he tried to put a brave face on it.
Undoubtedly, it's been a disappointing first spring when we would have expected some birds back. But it's a learning process. We're improving the rearing techniques, and we're intending to release more birds.
But unknown to Charlie, events were taking a curious turn.
Last Monday, Jonathan Taylor, one of the wardens, had noticed one of the male corncrakes behaving very strangely. I'd just been catching insects for the corncrake chicks, and as I got to the pens, I noticed some movement out of the corner of my eye. I had a quick glance and just briefly saw an adult bird rushing off through the nettles up the bank.
This confirmed for us that there was a bird on the outside of the pen attracted to our male.
So that Friday evening we went down and let the male go with the hope that they will now form a pair on the reserve. So fingers crossed, we'll have some wild chicks here soon.
The bird outside the pen was probably one of last year's releases. Finally some encouraging news, but nothing more was seen of either bird.
Much wilder birds this year, I thought.
In 2004, 75 corncrakes were brought up from Whipsnade and released into the washes. Then, towards the end of the summer, a surprising discovery.
I'm nearly thinking the job's nearly over. Suddenly a corncrake walked out in front of me. I stopped to watch it, but it just flew off just as I got my binoculars out. 2 more corncrakes walked out of the bit of grass that was left behind the tractor. Probably the outcome of the single breeding attempt this year between the captive male which we released in June and the female which he attracted. It is the first bit of success we've had, and it's a brilliant way to end 2004.
The following year, an expedition was organised to collect birds from Poland.
We really need to get some totally unrelated birds into the population to help the genetics of the birds that we're releasing into the wild. What they're doing is listening to calling males, and they're playing tape recordings at them. The males then respond to that tape recording. They get very agitated when they hear what they think is another corncrake in their territory. And the people that have got the tape with them then are able to trap the corncrake which comes right up close to them and even between their legs.
While the new Polish birds were still in quarantine, 2005 proved another successful year for releasing young English corncrakes back into the wild.
Well, it's been a pleasure to work with RSPB and Whipsnade Wild Animal Park. The corncrake is one of just a handful of globally threatened species that we've got in the UK, which we can actually do something for and make our contribution to conserving global biodiversity. We really need to give this bird a helping hand to bring it back to once again be a common bird of England's meadows.
Wow, that was superb.
The real success of this project is about getting birds back, breeding themselves on the washes, and then those offspring coming back.
But in 2005, not even one of the previous year's many releases had so far returned. Had the single breeding success of 2004 been a false dawn? Then, late in the season, a calling male.
Hi. Evening, Andy. Hi.
Andy made the journey over to hear the good news for himself.
Hi. So you've been hearing a bird calling then?
Mark heard it last night, and it was singing a little bit during the day today, and we've just heard it starting up just now. So it's not continuous yet.
Okay.
Just 1 or 2 calls. I hope that we're not the only things listening to it. Hopefully there's a female corncrake out there listening to it as well.
Yeah, that's the thing, isn't it?
Yeah, maybe.
That'd be fantastic if it is.
There it is.
Oh yes.
Yeah, I think I hear this continuously actually when I sleep.
It's a real success at last, to sort of, after all the work everyone has put in, collecting the food, feeding them, transporting them, rearing the chicks, the sheer amount of monitoring that's gone on and the planning, it seems to have been years and years. Well, it has been years now. And the thing I'm probably most pleased about is that it's in this hayfield. It's in this hayfield which we deliberately left for corncrakes, and it's singing from it, and that is just perfect.
Fingers crossed, maybe another 20 years it'll be a common call once again all over East Anglia.
Superb. It's good to hear.
And at Whipsnade, the techniques for hand-rearing corncrake chicks changed dramatically for the better. Around 100 young corncrakes were released each summer, and at last, more corncrakes were starting to return from Africa. On summer nights, attempts were made to catch birds in order to identify them from the information on their ring tags. In 2009, the RSPB recorded 18 males calling in the washes, the highest number since the project started.
Well, whatever the way into this field is.
Of these, at least 6 had been bred at Whipsnade the previous year, and 3 others had successfully completed the migration to Africa twice. A tremendous feat. Tonight, Rhys Green is tracking a lone caller.
Well, we're right at the end of the corncrake singing season, and we're playing this tape to see if a bird that was here a couple of nights ago is still around and will respond to the tape. Turn the tape off, Chris, as quick as you can. Thanks. Okay, so we've just caught that bird flying in. It's I can see straight away it's ringed, so it could well be one of the ones we've already had. We'll soon find out. EL 59991. So this is a bird that was hatched at Whipsnade Zoo in 2007, released then on the Nene washes, and it was almost exactly where it was earlier in the season until a week or so ago last year. So it's come back to more or less the same spot. And that's about 2 kilometres maybe from where it was released.
But the real success of 2009 was the discovery of 4 corncrakes which had not been released by the project team. These were almost certainly birds that had hatched and fledged in the wild. Once sufficient wild birds are breeding again, the release of captive bred chicks will wind down.
This one's been to Africa twice, and I've got to go and let him go now.
We've come a very long way in 10 years. I don't think we can yet say that we've completely cracked the project, but we've made a tremendous amount of progress. We've refined things now so that we are producing large numbers of chicks, we're getting good numbers of birds returning, and I think it means that we know that what we're doing is definitely on the right tracks, and I think we're very nearly there now.